she proposed to the Alpha King on a dare. He said yes, and unlike everyone else in that tavern laughing at the joke, he was not joking. Elena Stormclaw was not supposed to be there that night. She was supposed to be in the barracks reviewing guard schedules, fixing problems no one had asked her to fix, carrying responsibilities that would be credited to someone else by morning. That was her life. That was the pattern she had lived inside for 3 years, as second in command of the Moonfang Royal Guard. Instead, she was standing on a chair, 12 drinks past reasonable, pointing at a hooded stranger, telling him, and anyone else in the Broken Fang willing to listen, that Alpha King Asher Ironwolf was running the kingdom like a man who had never once checked whether his own supply chains worked. The table full of guards she called friends was losing control of itself entirely. The stranger had been sitting alone for over an hour. Dark cloak, no insignia. The kind of stillness that belongs to people who are very good at watching, without being watched. He had been asking her questions all evening, not challenging. Curious. The kind of questions that made her say more than she intended. If the Alpha King is so incompetent, he said, what would you do differently? She told him, in detail, with specific numbers. He almost smiled. And if he offered you the crown? Before she could answer, the dare arrived from across the table. Someone shouted it over the music, and the laughter, and the clatter of tankards. Ask him to marry you. If you're so sure you'd do better, ask him to marry you. Elena looked at the stranger, raised her drink. Tell your king that Elena Stormclaw of the Moonfang Guard proposes marriage, effective immediately, on the condition that he lets her fix what he's broken. She finished the ale in one long drink. The stranger stood, reached up, pulled back his hood. The silver crown caught the candlelight first. The room went silent before Elena's mind caught up to what her eyes were seeing, because she knew that face. Every guard in the kingdom knew that face. Alpha King Asher Ironwolf picked up her fallen tankard from the floor, set it gently on the table, looked at her with an expression she could not read at all. Proposal accepted, he said. Then he walked out the door, and Elena Stormclaw stood in the wreckage of the worst and most important decision of her life, and felt, somewhere beneath the horror, the very first pull. Not attraction, not yet. Something older than that. Something her wolf recognized before her mind did. Something she had no name for and would spend the next 3 months trying to explain away. She could not explain it away. Hi viewers, before we dive in, Elena spent 14 months doing the right thing while someone else took the credit. Has that ever been you? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one. And if you are new here, subscribe before this story pulls you in any further. Because once chapter 1 starts, you are not going anywhere. Now, let us go back to the night Elena Stormclaw made the worst and most important decision of her life. Chapter 1. The worst decision of Elena Stormclaw's life. She did not sleep. She lay on her cot in the guard barracks and stared at the ceiling and conducted a thorough internal investigation into whether she had imagined the entire evening. She had not imagined it. Lyra Moonshadow had confirmed this by grabbing her arm the moment the tavern door closed and whispering, "That was the king," approximately 14 times without pause. Riker Nightfang had gone the color of old ash, despite having no personal involvement, and Elena herself had sat at that table for 2 more hours, while the tavern slowly roared back to life around her, completely unable to move. By morning, every person in the room had told someone. By mid-morning, every person in the palace had heard. She found out the exact radius of the story's spread when she walked through the barracks gate for morning drills, and the entire eastern wing went silent. She kept her face still. This was one of her better skills. Elena had held the position of second in command for 3 years. Not because anyone had championed her for it, because she had been impossible to overlook once the person above her had stopped doing the job and she had quietly started doing it instead, and at some point it became official, because making it unofficial was more complicated. In 3 years she had reorganized the rotation schedule twice, caught 4 instances of supply theft, redesigned patrol routes to eliminate redundancy, and corrected 6 reports submitted by people senior to her who could not be bothered to check their own numbers. She had received 1 formal commendation, addressed to her captain. Cale Blackthorne was broad, politically connected, and excellent at being in rooms. He had been Elena's captain for 3 years, and her mentor for one before that. She trusted him more than she trusted almost anyone. She did not trust him enough to go to him now. "Walk with me," Lyra said. They went to the east wall. Cold morning stone. No one nearby. "He was there alone," Elena said, before Lyra could ask anything. "I know. Kings don't go to taverns alone. They go with guards, aides, someone whose job is to prevent exactly what happened last night." She looked at the horizon. He was listening. The whole evening. He asked questions specifically designed to make me keep talking. He was gathering information, Lyra said, about the supply problem, about who inside the palace knew, and what they knew. Elena felt the shape of it settling into place. He wasn't there by coincidence. He was there because someone told him the guards talked honestly after hours. And then he found me. And what did he find? Elena closed her eyes briefly. A guard getting drunk and handing him a 14-month investigation in one evening. The sound of boots announced Damon Silverclaw crossing the courtyard toward her, with the expression of a man given a task he found professionally uncomfortable. He stopped, looked at his notes, looked at Elena. His Majesty requests the presence of Elena Stormclaw at the Eastern Hall, immediately. Every guard within earshot turned. "Of course," Elena said, and she crossed the courtyard like a woman who had somewhere to be. The Eastern Hall was smaller than she expected. Maps on the walls. Good light. 3 people. Damon near the door, a scribe pretending not to exist, and Alpha King Asher Ironwolf, standing at a document-covered table looking like a man who had been working since before sunrise. He was taller in daylight. Or perhaps the tavern candlelight had softened him, and morning corrected the impression. No crown today. Dark jacket. Silver collar detail. The face of someone who had not, as far as she could tell, lost a single hour of sleep over the previous evening. She stopped at the appropriate distance. "Your Majesty, I want to apologize." "You were honest," he said. She stopped. "You gave me 3 specific supply chain failures, an investigative framework, and a proposed solution. Before you knew who I was." He moved around the table, not toward her, repositioning. She noticed how he moved. Carefully, nothing wasted. "How long have you been tracking the discrepancies?" 14 months. "Reported to Captain Cale Blackthorne. Twice." He said clerical error. He would have it reviewed. "Was it reviewed?" "Not to my knowledge." Asher was quiet a moment. Then, "I accepted your proposal last night. I assumed. I was not joking," he said. The scribe's quill went still. Elena searched his face for humor she was not sophisticated enough to detect. There was none. "You proposed to fix my kingdom," he said. "I accepted. I intend to hold you to that." A pause. "I'm not asking you to love me, Stormclaw. I'm asking you to work alongside me on problems that are not getting solved." She stood still for a long moment. The supply chain problem was real. She had been sitting with it for over a year. No authority to pursue it. No one above her willing to act. He was offering her the authority. He was also offering something she did not know how to name yet. Being seen. Not her report. Her. "I have conditions," she said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. "Of course you do." The conditions were 5. She would not move into the palace. She would not wear ceremonial dress unless required. She would continue guard duties until her replacement was trained. She would have full access to supply records. She would report directly to the Alpha King and no one else. He agreed to all 5 without negotiation. That should have told her something. The chaos that followed was the loudest week of Elena's professional life. By the 3rd day, the palace had split into 2 factions. Those who believed Asher had lost his mind, and those who believed Elena was either brilliant or dangerous, and could not agree which. The noble families began making strategic social overtures to her, which she ignored. The guard barracks were worse, not with cruelty, but with the specific discomfort of being seen after years of invisibility. On the 4th morning, Lyra appeared at her elbow. "Riker said this makes sense, because you've always believed you could run things better than everyone above you. Is that what he thinks this is?" Elena said. "It's what several of them think." "And you?" Lyra was quiet a moment. "I think you spent 14 months watching a problem get ignored, and someone finally offered you the tool to fix it. The tool happens to come with a crown. A pause. I also think you're not sleeping. I'm sleeping. You look like someone who is lying about sleeping. Elena stopped outside the records room. He hasn't made a single joke about any of this. He sat across from me for 2 hours yesterday, reviewing shipment schedules, and he asked real questions. And he listened. Not performed listening. Actual listening. She looked at the door. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to know yet, Lyra said. You just have to find the supply chain. Elena went inside. Chapter 2. The morning after disaster. The records room was cold and badly organized, and smelled of old parchment. Elena loved it immediately. She had been given a corner table, a lamp, and 8 years of supply ledgers. She had also been given, to her surprise, the occasional presence of Asher Ironwolf himself, who appeared every second or third afternoon without announcement and worked at the far end of the table while she worked at hers. He never interrupted unless she interrupted first. She found this easier than she expected. What was not easier was the rest of the palace. The morning of the 5th day brought the first formal humiliation. She arrived at the barracks equipment room to find 3 junior guards debating, loudly and without checking whether she was behind them, whether the Alpha King had accepted the proposal because he found the whole thing amusing, or because he wanted a loyal guard at close distance who would not question orders. She stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds. All 3 turned. No one said anything. Equipment check, Elena said. 30 minutes. Full inventory. They scrambled. She walked to the far wall and did not allow her face to do anything at all. That afternoon, a noble she had never spoken to stopped her in the main corridor with a smile that belonged on something that ate smaller creatures. The future Luna, the woman said warmly. We must have you to dinner. My husband has so many questions about your background. I'm sure he does, Elena said, and kept walking. By the 2nd week, there were 3 separate noble families who had attempted to schedule private meetings with her. A formal request from the palace social secretary asking her dress measurements, and 1 anonymous letter suggesting she consider the honor of stepping aside before she embarrassed herself further. She kept the letter. She was going to find out who sent it. What she was not going to do was show any of this to Asher, because the moment she did it became his problem to manage, and she was not interested in needing to be managed. What she did not anticipate was that he already knew. The letter, he said one afternoon, not looking up from his documents. She looked up. Which letter? The anonymous one suggesting you step aside. He turned a page. It came from Riker Nightfang's household. His wife writes in a distinctive style. I've seen enough of her correspondence to recognize it. Elena set down her ledger. You didn't say anything. It's not my letter to manage, he said. It's yours. I assumed you would handle it. She looked at him for a moment. You're the first person in years willing to tell me the truth, he said quietly. He was still looking at his document. That's not something I encountered frequently before you. He turned another page. The letter is an inconvenience. You're not. The warmth that moved through her chest was small and specific, and very inconvenient. She looked back at the ledgers. On the 8th day, she found the first clean evidence. A delivery record from 18 months ago. Grain shipment logged as received, signed off by a supply officer who, when cross-referenced with the patrol rotation log, had been stationed at the eastern wall on the same date. He could not have been in 2 places. Someone had copied his signature imperfectly. Slightly different ink pressure, slightly inconsistent letter spacing. She brought it to Asher that evening. He studied it for a long time. Someone is altering these after the fact, he said. Yes, and this is where the grain actually went. She placed the second document beside the first. Sold to a merchant supplier in the Southern Territories, 9 other instances across 18 months. Grain, medical supplies, armor, tools. Someone is consistently diverting kingdom resources and covering the trail. He leaned back. Outside, the evening patrol changed. Boots on stone. Handover murmurs. Elena had trained half those guards. This is not a single supply officer, Asher said. No. Someone senior enough to alter official records after filing, with established connections to outside merchants. He looked at her directly. I want to go to the villages. Verify actual intake against these records in person. See where the chain physically breaks. I was going to request that, she said. We go together, he said. Not a question. She thought about arguing. Then she thought about 14 months of carrying this alone. 3 days, he said. Small escort. No announcements. She nodded. As she rose to leave, he said, without looking up, You notice things everyone else walks past? It did not sound like flattery. It sounded like a fact he had been sitting with for a while. She left before the warmth in her chest could become something she had to name. Chapter 3. A fake engagement with real consequences. The carriage was small. Elena had not considered this when agreeing to the travel arrangement. She sat with her document case on her lap and her attention on the passing trees, and was thoroughly, professionally aware of how little space existed between her shoulder and his. Asher spent the first morning reading reports and making notes in precise small handwriting. He asked her logistics questions. She answered them. He listened the way he always listened, completely, without the half-attention she had learned to expect from people who outranked her. By the second afternoon, she had stopped noticing the closeness. By the third morning, she had started noticing other things. He was exhausted, not dramatically, the kind that does not show unless you are trained to look. The heel of his hand pressed briefly to his temple when he thought no one was watching. The stillness that came over him mid-sentence, not from thought, but from the particular fatigue of carrying too much weight for too long. She was trained to look. She had spent 3 years observing people in her guard. She knew the difference between a tired body and a tired person. Asher was a tired person, the kind that accumulates when you are responsible for thousands of lives and the systems that support them, and the problems that threaten them, and the people who pretend the problems do not exist. She had spent 14 months angry at his administration. She had not, until now, thought about the man running it. In the second village, an elderly woman named Sana stepped directly into Asher's path. My grandchildren went hungry last winter, she said. No greeting, no deference. 3 months of short grain, but the records say full supply was received. She held his gaze without apology. Who do I complain to? You're complaining to me right now, Asher said. He did not step back, did not look away, and I'm listening. Sana studied his face for a long, silent moment. Fine, she said. Fix it, and walked away. Elena wrote the woman's name without being asked. Asher glanced at the notebook, said nothing. That was when she felt it for the second time. The first had been in the tavern, beneath the horror of recognition, a pull she had dismissed as the disorientation of a shocking moment. Now, standing beside him in a dusty village square, watching him receive an old woman's anger without flinching, she felt it again. Not romantic, not simple, her wolf pressing forward slightly, alert to something her mind had not yet processed. She filed it away, moved on to the village records. That night, in the inn, she sat reviewing intake logs while Asher met with the village elder next door. His voice came through the thin wall as murmur without words. She noticed, as she had noticed in the records room, that his tone was the same with the village elder as it was with foreign advisors. He did not perform differently for different audiences. She was making a note about a supply discrepancy when the carriage driver appeared in the doorway. Miss Stormclaw, someone on the road ahead, multiple figures. She was on her feet before he finished the sentence. 4 attackers. Disciplined movement, no insignia. Not bandits. Bandits moved differently, with hunger and desperation. These moved like trained soldiers executing a planned operation. She took down the first in under 10 seconds. The second required more care. The third was well trained, and Elena was also angry, which made the difference. When the road was clear, she turned to find Asher 2 steps behind her, blade drawn, having been prepared to fight. She had not expected that. "Are you hurt?" she said. "No." He looked at the figure her escort had restrained. "This is the second attempt in 3 months." Her head came up sharply. "The second. A wall collapse in the eastern courtyard during inspection. I was 6 feet from where it fell. It was reported as structural failure." His jaw was tight. "I am no longer confident that assessment was correct." Elena looked at the road, the trees, the careful positioning of the attack. Someone had known their route. Someone inside the palace. Chapter 4. The king nobody sees. The prisoner said nothing. 3 hours in the holding room. Perfect silence. The kind that is trained into someone. People do not develop that kind of silence without preparation, which meant someone had prepared him for capture, and told him that capture was a possibility worth preparing for. She reported this to Asher and dismissed Damon Silverclaw from the room. Someone knew our route, she said. Yes, only your senior staff knew the destination. Yes, she waited. I have suspected for some time that the corruption has a senior architect, he said. He was at the window. The afternoon light showed the exhaustion clearly from this angle. Someone here long enough to understand which records to alter, long enough to have protected the operation across multiple reporting cycles. He turned. I cannot move on suspicion. I need evidence connecting to a specific person. That's what I'm building, she said. I know. A pause. Be careful. Not with the danger. I know you can manage that. Be careful in the sense that if they know you're close, you become the problem they need to solve. She had already calculated this. She had decided the answer was to work faster. She did not say this. I'll be careful, she said. He held her gaze a moment. There was something in it she had no clean category for. The specific quality of attention you give someone you cannot afford to lose and have not yet said so. She looked away first. That evening in the strategy room, Damon Silverclaw reviewed maps with them for an hour, then excused himself. Cale Blackthorn had been invited and sent word that a guard matter required him. The third time this month he had declined a senior briefing. Elena noted this without expression. Filed it. She was annotating a supply route when the room went quiet in a particular way, and she looked up to find that Asher had fallen asleep in his chair. Not dramatically, just stopped holding himself upright. The tension gone. The crown weight gone. Just a man who had been running on insufficient sleep for what she suspected was a very long time, finally outrun by it. She sat with that for a moment. She thought about the wall collapse he had mentioned without drama, the road attack, the weight he was carrying alone, without apparently telling anyone, because there was no one he trusted enough to tell. She folded the map she had been annotating and left it where he would find it. She extinguished her lamp. She left without waking him. In the corridor, she pressed her back to the wall. Her wolf was not subtle about it anymore. The pull was not distant or deniable. It was directional. It pointed back through the door she had just closed, toward a man who fell asleep over his own workload and received village women's anger with sincerity, and had been navigating an assassination campaign without telling a single person who might have helped carry the weight. She pushed off the wall. She walked back to the barracks and told herself firmly that she was not in trouble. She was completely in trouble. Chapter 5. Falling in love was never part of the plan. 3 things arrived in the 4th week together. A second assassination attempt, public recognition she did not know how to receive, and a truth from Lyra that landed harder than either. The attempt came during Southern Post inspection. 2 arrows from elevation. Elena pulled Asher behind the guard station wall a half-second before the first one struck. The second hit wood above their heads while they were crouched low, close, breathing the same air. He looked at her. She felt it like a current through her whole body, the pull so sharp it was almost sound, her wolf responding to his proximity with something that was not fear, and was not calm, and was nothing she had a word for yet. "Move," she said. They moved. 6 hours later she had traced the trajectory, found the rooftop position, and delivered the information to Damon because she could no longer take anything to Cale without risking the thing she was building. The public recognition came through the villages first. The story of the Alpha King traveling personally to investigate supply failures, accompanied by the guard who had tracked the problem for over a year, moved through the kingdom along trade routes. Elena started receiving acknowledgments from people who had previously looked through her. An older guard who had ignored her for 3 years held a door. A village messenger came to the palace asking specifically for her. A noble she had never met sent a genuine compliment. Asher made it worse by being consistent about it. In briefings, he attributed conclusions correctly. In meetings, he redirected questions that belonged to her. In a forum with regional representatives, when someone asked how the supply corruption had been uncovered, he said, "Elena Stormclaw identified it. She's been working on it for 14 months. The room had looked at her. She had not known what to do with her face. Lyra found her in the corridor afterward. "You're falling for him," Lyra said. "I am conducting an investigation. You're doing both." Elena walked faster. Lyra kept pace. "What if this is strategy?" Elena said. "What if I was useful to him, and he is very good at making people feel seen when he needs something from them?" "Then he's been doing it for 6 weeks across multiple crises with no audience present," Lyra said. "That's a lot of effort for a performance with no witnesses." Elena said nothing. "The first person who recognizes your worth shouldn't surprise you this much," Lyra said. "The surprising part is everyone who missed it for this long." The balcony was not planned. Elena went up for better light on a document. Asher went up for fresh air after 3 consecutive hours of unreasonable foreign representatives. They arrived at opposite ends at nearly the same moment, and both stopped. Below them, the palace grounds lay quiet. Full moon, very bright, turning stone to silver. "I keep finding you in places," he said. "Small palace," she said. He laughed, low, brief, surprised, a sound she had never heard from him before, and immediately wanted to hear again. They stood in easy silence for a moment, which was its own thing. The fact that silence with him had become easy. "How many more attempts do you think there will be?" she asked. "Until whoever is behind this believes they've won or lost," he said. He stood beside her at the railing, close enough that she was aware of the warmth of him. "I think we're close." "We are. 3 more records to verify." A pause. "When this is over, I want to talk about that," he said. "Not the investigation." She looked at him. He was watching her with that full attention that she had stopped being surprised by, but had not stopped feeling. Like light on a specific spot. Warm and undeniable. "I'm afraid of being wrong about you," she said. "Tell me what wrong looks like. That this was strategy. That I was a useful piece you moved into position." He was quiet long enough that she thought she had gone too far. "I am skilled at managing people," he said finally. "I've had to be. It keeps the kingdom stable." He turned to face her more fully. "Managing people means keeping them at a useful distance. I have not managed to do that with you, no matter how much simpler it would have been." He reached up and very carefully moved a strand of hair from her face. His fingers barely touched her cheek. She felt it everywhere. "I don't want to manage you," he said quietly. "I want to be honest with you. Those are not the same thing, and I keep choosing the second one even when the first would be safer." She kissed him, not impulsively, deliberately. She reached up and kissed him, and he kissed her back with the same complete attention he gave everything. Full and careful and entirely present, and the mating pull she had been filing away and denying for 5 weeks rose through her like a tide, and she understood suddenly and completely that it had never been something she could explain away. It was real. It had been real since the tavern. Her wolf had known it before her mind had finished processing the crown. When they stepped apart, she was very awake. "There's a document," she said. "What document?" "The one I came up here to read." He almost smiled. "Read it tomorrow." She almost stayed, but she unfolded it in the better light of the interior corridor, and found, on the 3rd page, a name in cipher that made everything inside her go cold and still. Chapter 6. The Truth That Broke Everything. Cale Blackthorne. The cipher resolved clearly once she applied the number pattern she had found across 6 weeks of records, 18 months of coordinated diversions, falsified signatures, payments to outside suppliers, and, most recently, a reference to arranged removal of impediments to transition. She stood in the corridor for a long time. Cale, her captain, her mentor, the man who had taken her seriously when she was new, who had taught her how palace operations functioned, who had been the first senior officer to treat her conclusions as worth reading, who had told her, 14 months ago, that the supply discrepancies were clerical error. She replayed that conversation now with new eyes. He had not been dismissing an overcautious junior's analysis. He had been assessing how much she knew, and deciding whether she was a problem yet. She had not been a problem then. She was now. She gave the documents to Damon at 7 the next morning. "This goes directly to the Alpha King," she said. "Not through the captain's office. Not through any channel Cale Blackthorne has access to." Damon looked at the documents. His eyes went very still. "How certain?" "Completely." He went immediately. She returned to the barracks and sat on her cot, and thought about Cale, not the corrupt official, but the man who had shaped her professional life. The betrayal was not clean. It was not something she could package and set aside. He had genuinely invested in her development. He had also been using the institution she loved to enrich himself, and had arranged violence against the man she was falling in love with. Both things were true simultaneously, and neither canceled the other, and the combination was its own particular kind of devastation. Asher came at noon. She knew from the knock, 3 times, measured, that Damon had told him. She opened the door. His face was careful in the way she now recognized as him working out how to be honest about something difficult. "You've seen the documents," she said. "Yes." She let him in. The room was small. He sat by the window without making the smallness worse. "I need to tell you something," he said. She already knew. "The engagement," she said. "When you accepted, in the tavern." He was quiet. "You didn't accept because it was funny," she said. "You accepted because I was second in command of the Moonfang Guard, and you suspected someone inside the guard was the architect of the corruption. Putting me close to you gave you an inside path without alerting whoever it was." The silence confirmed it. "Say yes or no," she said. "Yes," he said. "That was part of my reasoning. I had been listening for someone with genuine knowledge of the supply problem. When I found you, I saw an opportunity. I used it." A pause. "That is true." The floor shifted. "You trusted me with your kingdom," she said quietly, "but not your reasons." He did not defend himself, did not offer explanations or context, or the list of other things that were also true. He let it be what it was. That restraint almost made it worse. "I need time," she said. "Of course." He stood, moved to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. "For what it's worth." "Please," she said. He left. She sat on the edge of the cot, and looked at the wall, and thought about a moonlit balcony, and a man who had said, "I don't want to manage you," and had also, it turned out, done exactly that at the beginning. And the fact that both things could be true was the part she did not know how to hold. She did not go to the palace for 3 days. She ran her guard duties. She worked the records. She was very focused on paperwork whenever Lyra appeared. On the 4th day, Damon came to the barracks. "Cale knows something has changed," he said. "He's making overtures to Riker Nightfang. If Riker backs a formal challenge to the Alpha King's authority with his family's influence, a coup can be dressed as a legal proceeding," Elena said. "Yes, we believe he moves within the week. He'll request a formal council session. Once he controls the narrative in that room, he controls the outcome." She looked at the wall, thought about Sana, and the northern guards on short rations, and a man who fell asleep over his own workload because he had no one to share the weight with. Thought about what happened to all of that if Cale won. "I'll be at the council session," she said. Chapter 7. The Alpha King's Choice. The Royal Council Chamber held 47 people on a significant occasion. On the morning Cale Blackthorne requested an emergency session regarding royal misconduct, it held 63. Elena stood in the doorway and counted them. She was in full Moonfang Guard uniform. She had spent the previous evening organizing every document into a clean cross-reference set that could be presented in under 12 minutes to people without her 6 weeks of context. She had also made a decision. She was angry at Asher. That was real, and it was not resolved. But anger at a person was not the same as doubt about the truth. She had always known the difference between those two things. Cale stood at the front of the chamber, looking entirely like the man she had known for 4 years. Authoritative, at ease in rooms like this. She understood now that the ease came not from confidence, but from knowing he had controlled the variables. He saw her enter. Something moved across his face. Recalculation. Asher sat at the head of the table, flanked by Damon and 2 senior advisors. He did not look at her when she entered. He was reading the room. Cale spoke well. She had to acknowledge it. Measured authority. Careful implication. No direct accusation. Concerns regarding unauthorized travel. Irregular meetings. The engagement of a junior officer in matters above her station. He let the room's existing anxieties do the heavy lifting. Riker Nightfang sat in the 3rd row and said nothing, which was its own kind of support. Kale was midway through suggesting the Alpha King might benefit from additional counsel regarding his fitness to manage the current situation, when Elena stood. She did not ask permission. "Captain Blackthorn," she said clearly. "Where were you on the 14th day of the harvest month, 18 months ago?" The room turned. Kale's expression did not move. "This is not the..." A supply shipment of 400 grain sacks was logged as delivered to the northern outpost under your authorization seal on that date, she said. "The northern outpost has no record of receiving it. The delivery officer listed was stationed at the eastern wall that same day. He could not have been in two places." She opened the first document and set it on the table. "I have the original records. I have the cipher cross-referencing disbursement payments to an outside contact. I have written confirmation from that contact, obtained last week from his own records in the Southern Territories." She set the second document beside the first. "And I have your name, in your own handwriting, on a transfer order that does not exist in the official ledger because the original was replaced by a falsified version." She looked at him directly. "Every document presented here was logged with the Palace Records Office this morning. They cannot be altered or removed." The chamber broke into sound. Riker Nightfang looked at Kale, looked at the documents. Did the calculation ambitious people always do? Fast, without sentiment, and sat back down. Kale's hands, flat on the table, went white at the knuckles. "You've been thorough," he said. His voice was different now. The performance had left it. 4 years of watching you work, and I still underestimated how far you'd go. "You told me it was clerical error," she said. "Did you believe I'd accept that permanently? I believed you'd hit the limits of your access and stop." A pause. "I was wrong." "Yes," she said. "You were." She turned to address the room. "The investigation you've characterized as irregular was conducted with full documentation at the Alpha King's direction, in response to a real crisis affecting kingdom welfare. The supply diversions have damaged multiple northern settlements across 18 months. The assassination attempts on the Alpha King's life, 2 in the past month, trace through the same contact network identified in these records." The chamber erupted. Kale moved for the door. Elena was already there. She had 12 feet on him and 4 years of guard training. And she was also, very specifically, furious. Not the hot kind, but the cold, clean kind that makes every movement precise. She blocked the exit. He stopped. They looked at each other, and she saw, underneath all of it, the authority, the calculation, the 4 years of careful construction. Just a man who had run out of room. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly, only for him to hear. "You had a position. You had standing. You had people who trusted you." "You don't understand what I was offered," he said. "I understand what you chose," she said. "Stand down." He stood down. The guards took him. Riker Nightfang requested, at considerable volume, an opportunity to clarify his position. The request was declined. Elena turned. Asher was standing at the front of the chamber watching her with an expression she had no category for and did not try to name. She did not cross the room, but she held his gaze. He inclined his head. She nodded back. It was not forgiveness. It was not the end of the anger. It was something smaller and more honest than either. An acknowledgement that the truth mattered more than her pain, and that she had chosen it, and that he had seen her choose it. That was enough. For now. 4 months passed. Kale Blackthorn was convicted on all charges. The contact network was dismantled. Riker Nightfang survived politically by being aggressively cooperative, which Elena had predicted down to the tone of his opening statement at the inquiry. The Moonfang Royal Guard was restructured according to a plan. Elena wrote over 3 weeks and revised 6 times. Every commendation went to the person who earned it. Every report filed under the correct name. Every discrepancy investigated to resolution. Asher approved the plan without changing a single word. She understood now why that was the highest compliment she had ever received. She and Asher did not speak of the balcony for a long time, not because either of them forgot, because some things need room before they can be said correctly. He did not press her. She noticed that he did not press her. What he did was smaller and more durable. He sent a personal confirmation to Santa in the second village when the grain supply was fully restored, as he had promised. He delivered it himself. Elena was not there for it, but Damon mentioned it later, without being asked, in the particular way that meant Asher had not mentioned it himself. He restructured the senior reporting chain so that the second in command of the Royal Guard reported directly to the Crown rather than through the captain's position. He did not announce this. He simply changed the paperwork and let it stand. He stopped attending briefings alone. Not with her specifically, with anyone. He began building the habit of having a witness to his reasoning, which was what she had suggested in one of her reform notes as a systemic protection against the kind of unchecked authority that had allowed Kale to operate. He had read that note. He had implemented it without discussion. She noticed all of it. She did not say anything, but she noticed. The mating bond, which she had spent 6 weeks trying to explain away, stopped being something she managed and became something she simply lived inside. It was quieter than she expected. Not the dramatic pull of the early weeks, just a persistent awareness, like knowing where someone is in a room without looking, like the particular quality of a silence that has someone specific in it. In the 3rd month, Lyra told her she was clearly done being angry. Elena said she was still processing. Lyra said those were not the same thing. Elena told her to mind her own business. Lyra smiled and went back to her drink. She heard about the tavern from Damon, who mentioned it with elaborate casualness that told her he had been asked to mention it. The Alpha King had been seen at the Broken Fang 2 evenings running. Same table, same corner. He was drinking something stronger than usual, and he had been seen looking at the door with the expression of a man waiting for something he was not sure was coming. Elena walked there alone on the 3rd evening. The tavern smelled exactly the same. Smoke, roasted meat, slightly off-key music from the corner. The floorboards still warped, the candles still crooked. Nothing had changed, and everything had. He was at the corner table, no hood, plain jacket, a drink in front of him that had not been touched. He was looking at the table with the expression of someone who had set up the most important moment of the past year, and was now finding out whether the setup held. She sat across from him. He looked up. He reached into his jacket and placed a ring on the table between them. Simple. Silver. A small stone that caught the candlelight the same way the crown had caught it the night this began. He looked at her. "I owe you a full conversation about all of it," he said. "The beginning, the middle, the parts that were wrong, and why they were wrong. I intend to have that conversation. All of it." His hands, she noticed, were not entirely steady. "But I wanted to say something first." She waited. "I was serious the first time," he said. "What I said when I accepted. I was not performing. I was not managing. I saw someone who told me the truth when no one else would, and I wanted to keep that close to me." A pause. "That doesn't excuse what I didn't tell you, but it's true alongside the rest of it." She looked at the ring on the table. She thought about all of it. The tavern and the supply chain, and the villages and a man falling asleep over his own work. The wall collapse he had mentioned without drama, because he had been carrying it alone. The way he had looked at her on the balcony, and the fact that it had been real, even though the beginning had been strategy, and both things were true simultaneously. She understood, finally, that the question was not whether the beginning was pure. Nothing began purely. The question was what it had become. She knew what it had become. She reached out and picked up the ring. He went completely still. "Ask me properly," she said. He leaned forward. His eyes were steady in a way his hands were not. "Marry me," he said. Elena Stormclaw. Who told a king the truth before she knew he was a king? Who tracked a problem for 14 months alone and fixed it when she had the authority? Who chose honesty over her own pain in front of 63 witnesses? He held her gaze. "Marry me. Let me spend whatever time I have, trying to be worth that." The tavern, which had been politely pretending not to listen, went entirely silent. Elena looked at him for a long moment. She slid the ring onto her finger. "Yes," she said, "and I have a revised list of kingdom reforms. 22 items. I expect them reviewed by the end of the month." He laughed, the real laugh, the one she had heard on the balcony for the first time and wanted again. The tavern erupted. The lute player, apparently moved by the occasion, began playing something that was actually in tune. The first time anyone present could remember this occurring. and it felt like the evening commenting on itself. Laura Moonshadow, seated 2 tables away where she had absolutely not been waiting for this outcome, raised her glass. Elena raised her empty one back. Elena Stormclaw became queen beside Asher Ironwolf at the end of that season. The ceremony was attended by people who had never come to a palace event before. Village farmers, northern outpost guards, supply officers whose names had finally appeared correctly on their own reports. They came because the woman standing at the front of the Great Hall was the reason their grain had arrived last winter, and the reason the person responsible for it not arriving had stood trial. She reformed the Royal Guard completely in the first year. She restructured the supply network in the second. She gave credit where it belonged. Every time. Without exception. Not as a policy but as a habit, because she understood what it cost to do work that disappeared into someone else's name. The kingdom's northern settlements stopped running short. The records stopped lying. The people who had been carrying invisible weight for invisible wages started being seen. Asher was a better king with her beside him than he had been before, not because she made him capable, but because she made it possible for him to be what he already was without carrying it alone, which was, as it turned out, the thing he had needed most, and which she had understood, standing in a dusty village square, watching him receive an old woman's anger without flinching, long before she was willing to admit it. If this story moved you, the best thing you can do right now is subscribe, so you never miss the next one. New stories go up every week, and they are worth being here for. If Elena and Asher earned it, drop a like before you go. It takes 1 second, and it means more than you know. And leave me 1 comment. I read every single one. I will see you in there. Until the next story, take care of yourselves.